and then those guys rise up and do something negative. But again, we're not political in this show at all. But just know that childhood trauma is devastating. It is unhealthy. It has an echo and generational effect. And I really am grateful to see that the public is taking it so seriously. And as therapists who have worked with children and worked with adults who were children who have been devastated by this, just know that we take it extremely seriously and do not allow anybody to soften the image of this tragedy and make it seem like it's not a big deal. It is devastating, and we will not know the full recourse of what has happened for years to come.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really the big thing that I wanted to accomplish today by bringing this up. I feel like we are in that unique position. We can come at this from the perspective of therapists who understand, the psychology and the effects of trauma. And I get the feeling that the people who do support this action don't understand the effects. I have to believe that because the only other alternative is that they don't care. And that bothers me.
Well, and if you're a listener out there, and again, we're not going to share too much of our political views, but if you're a listener and you say, well, no, we need to have some kind of enforcement, guys, absolutely, sure. I get it. Yeah. And if you're a constitutionalist, you probably don't believe in any punishment that goes into the category of cruel and unusual. So as therapists, it's important that we at least do our job and tell you, okay, here's the effect. Now, if you choose to still do that, okay, but now you're fully informed. And if that tempers your action, you say, wow, well, hold on, I don't want to hurt the kids here. How can we separate these two and get this correct? Okay, cool. Enter into that conversation. That's not our job to figure out. We're not politicians or lawmakers. We're just medical professionals. So our job is just to tell you, okay, here's the results of the action currently happening. Do with that what you will.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And there's always going to be risks involved to anything. I in my head, I think about, if I have a terminal disease and I could possibly be dead in 6 months, and there's a treatment out there that could extend my life, but the downside of that is it may potentially completely destroy my kidneys and my liver. I'm willing to take that risk if it extends my life. However, I'm not going to take that medication if I have the flu.
Yeah.
Right? So going back again to like the whole thing with, when a social worker has to intervene to protect the child and has to remove them, that is at that point where they make the determination. That professional knows the potential damage that they are doing by removing the child, but they have determined that that is a risk they have to take. If they take no action whatsoever, the situation is going to be worse. That's a tough decision to do. Yeah. And in this case, I wouldn't say that's warranted. But again, I'll get off my soapbox. You got on your soapbox a few episodes ago.
I did.
You did.
Yeah.
It was my turn today.
You did it. No, but I think that we're handling it as best we can, guys. And again, it's above our pay grade to have an answer for immigration reform. It's not our place. But, if you're curious about how this stuff affects the kids, it's front page news. We want to make sure that you were fully informed.
Absolutely. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we are going to hear from somebody who caught her husband having an affair with his stepsister. That sounds more like us.
Yeah.
All right, you're listening to Pod Therapy.
We're back. You're listening to Pod Therapy, and it's time to read our listener mail. Okay. I found out my husband has been cheating on me with his stepsister. I'm so disgusted and shocked. Yikes. Me and my husband have been married for 3 years. We have no kids yet. Our first 2 years of marriage were great. We nearly never fought. But my husband confessed to me that he was a serial cheater in the past. At first, I was insecure, but with time I trusted him. But on the 3rd year of marriage, this is when we became distant. He has a stepsister who lives overseas, and she was coming to the States to visit. She comes to the United States frequently and stays at a hotel near our home. When she would come visit, my husband would go out with her. Sometimes he wouldn't come back until the early hours of the morning. Again, I didn't think anything of it. I figured they were just bonding as siblings. Little did I know they were having an affair the whole time. This is how I found out. I was supposed to go on a business trip for 5 days, but I ended up coming back home after 2 days. When I came back home earlier than expected, I heard the guest bed shaking upstairs. I immediately knew what was happening, but I did not expect to see him doing it with his sister. I walked in on them having sex, and they were surprised. I quickly walked away and walked out of the house because I didn't want to do something stupid. I went to my car and drove to my parents' house. My husband tried to call me multiple times, but I didn't answer. I broke down crying, and I didn't only feel betrayed, I was disgusted, because even though they didn't have the same blood, I still think of it as incest. The next day, I went back to the house to get my stuff with my brother accompanying me. It's been 2 weeks now. I started looking for divorce lawyers, but my husband has a prenup, so I'm not sure how it's going to turn out. How do you trust someone again in the future if you go through something like this? I don't think I'll ever get married again.
I don't blame you.
Damn. That is intense.
That is intense. Yeah. So, I mean, our listener's question, how do you rebuild trust, or how do you have
Trust
another positive
again.
relationship again in the future? Yeah, that's going to be tough. And my advice, give yourself plenty of time. I mean, don't move too fast. It will happen. You can gain trust, but you're going to have to anticipate that there's going to be things that are going to happen in your next relationship that are going to be red flags to you that maybe wouldn't be a red flag to the average person.
Yeah. And, to speak to the specific unique dynamic here that this is his stepsister. So we now live in an America where there are lots and lots and lots of blended families, and we've seen this a lot. And I'm going to be honest, I have heard lots of stories and seen lots of patients and lots of families where this dynamic has existed. Now, this one's pretty big, but I have seen it where somebody comes in and says, I caught my 16-year-old boy checking out my 18-year-old daughter, their step-siblings, and I'm really concerned. Is he sick? Is he disgusting? Is he a pathological guy? And I back him down, and I'm like, no.
Yeah.
They are teenagers. They are not related by blood. There seems to be this biological braking system that occurs for people that are related by blood. In the same way that
Thankfully.
you gaze upon the face of your own child and you are genetically inclined to believe that they are the most beautiful damn thing that's ever existed. Because guess what? They look like you and you are biased. The same thing happens in reverse when it comes to sexuality. Parents are repulsed if they try to think of their child sexually, usually, unless something is pathologically broken in the human. And family systems are generally the same way. But whenever you have somebody that's not genetically aligned with you, it is not abhorrent or evil or pathological or broken for you to discover an attraction to them. We see this all the time. I've seen it with parents who confess that they have an attraction to their stepdaughter or son when they're in their 20s or something to that effect. Or siblings, I've seen it happen. A lot of stepsons have crushes on their stepmoms.
Or Donald and Ivanka.
Okay. There goes the not being political.
Sorry.
Yeah, but we've seen it a lot. So the first thing I want to say is, while this is horrific in the sense that an affair happened and shattered trust happened, and they abused the sibling trust and the family camaraderie in order to take advantage of the situation, the incest itself, I don't know that I would refer to this as incest proper. We'll call it step-incest, but not quite exactly what you think. Step-incest. I don't know. We'll leave that to the comedians. We'll let Matt and Paul tell us how to pronounce it. But so it's not necessarily incest, but definitely an affair has happened. And whenever we see things like this, Nick, we usually tell them to take care of themselves first, right? And to redraw those boundaries.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think she's on the right track. This is not something that it sounds like she wants to repair.
No.
I think, you're at that point. I think, and with the divorce and the prenup, I realize that that's definitely a downside, but it sounds like even that's not going to be something that you wouldn't want to work this relationship out simply because the divorce is going to be messy.
Yeah.
This is a good thing. Just cut, run, separate, take care of yourself. Really, this is an opportunity for you to focus on yourself, to be you again, outside of a marriage, outside of a partnership, and enjoy that time.
Yeah.
Don't rush into another relationship. Take time to heal. And we've said this before in the past, however long you guys were together, married for 3 years, plan on the next 3 years to just be you and kind of find yourself again.
And it's a young marriage. Only 3 years in, there's not a lot of building that's occurred that can't be undone. Listen, we're not lawyers. We're not going to tell you what the consequences of divorce are in your life. If you wanted to reconcile, then we're going to stand beside you and assist in that project to try to bring the two parties back together again and find healing. I don't hear you saying you want to do that. I hear you saying, how am I ever going to trust again once I have been damaged by an affair? So there's a lot of folks that are listening to this who find themselves being hypersensitive, hypervigilant, hard to trust. They feel insecure. And maybe they constantly check on their mate, their spouse, their girlfriend, their boyfriend, checking their text messages, going through emails, following up on where they say they are. And they're not doing it because that person's untrustworthy. They're doing it because they've been burned in the past. Mm-hmm. And so, folks, if you're out there today and you've, survived something similar to this, I'm sure this one's pretty unique, but if you've survived an affair, you really do have to check yourself, because I do want you to heal, and you're not going to be a successful person in relationship if you're insecure, or if you're constantly checking, if you're constantly patrolling, if you're constantly looking for them to fail. You will inflict the exact damage on the relationship that you're looking to avoid, and it'll be really hard. So that's something you ought to go to therapy for, and you ought to begin to confront and unpack for yourself. Because if you're thinking that you can patrol your way into safety, you're going to realize the hard way that that's not possible.
Right.
Yeah. But hang in there, get help, and go see a therapist, for goodness sake. That is a really weird story. And guess what? You're not crazy. He's definitely out of line. So get yourself some help, and we look forward to hearing back from you, and tell us how it all turned out.
Thank you for writing in.
We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we hear from a man who wants to move in with his fiance before getting married. You're listening to Pod Therapy.
We're back. You're listening to Pod Therapy, and this next question is from a man whose fiance's parents won't allow them to move in together. Is moving in together before marriage wrong? I believe that people should live together before marriage. It's how I was raised. It's normal here in Canada. I've been dating a Filipino woman in her late 20s for 3 years, and I proposed to her earlier this year. She lives with her family, and they are traditional, so we've never been able to sleep at one another's house. She has always been home every night by a certain hour. I have spoken to her father and have asked him for permission for her to move in with me. He said it's not what they do in their culture, and he doesn't give us his blessing. Lately, my fiancé and I have been talking about it again, and I want her to move in. She spoke with her father again, and he told her that I must not love her because I told her that I didn't want to get married unless she moved in first. I very much love her, but I value my beliefs too, and it's not just her family's. I don't know what to do. I feel that I'm not going to get to live with her before marriage, and for me, that's a big step. There are other things I'm willing to sacrifice or participate in that I don't necessarily want. For example, I'm not a religious person, but they want a church wedding, and I'm willing to do that. In all honesty, marriage doesn't even matter to me, but because they're religious, that is not an option. Any advice would be welcome. Thank you.
So when I first read this, Nick, I thought several different things. First, I thought about the statistic about whether or not moving in together improves or decreases the chances of a long-lasting marriage, which I'll let you guess at because I know that data.
Okay.
But I'm going to withhold it for a second.
Okay.
The other thing that I was thinking of is how you and I are constantly trained as therapists to respect the culture of the person. So if somebody comes into us and says, my religious faith tells me that I shouldn't swear, and my boyfriend wishes I would, and I'm uncomfortable, we're usually going to defer to the culture and say, hey, let's all respect this person's culture. I'm not going to tell you you should or shouldn't do anything. I'm going to respect your culture. But in this case, we kind of have two cultures. He kind of makes that clear. She has a Filipino culture, which is more conservative in this case. He has a Canadian culture, which is more progressive, which implies this would be a good thing to do, and he's bothered by not doing it. So what a fascinating problem to have.
Yeah, and the thing that I noticed about this is I'm not hearing what her take on any of this is. This, our writer seems to talk about his beliefs and her family's beliefs, but I'm kind of wondering, where is she at with all this? Because ultimately, I think a big chunk of this kind of falls back on her.
Right.
I think, to our listener, I think this is your wedding. This is about you and her. And I think that decision should be made between you and her.
Yeah.
Obviously, we don't want to intentionally upset, our future bride's family. But this is your decision. I think you guys need to work that out.
Yeah, be bold enough to make it together. But, I also understand Filipino culture. I've worked with quite a few people in therapy that come from the culture. Family is so important. Blessing is so important. And so for this female, for her, I can read into this a little bit and see that if you guys did make a bold decision that completely disenfranchised the wishes of the family and the culture, I want you to appreciate that you're asking her to do something that is really big for her. It might not be. She might not care at all. But I suspect that she does, or you wouldn't even be having this problem. And you need to appreciate that in that culture, you're asking her to do something permanent. That even if you guys get married and it all works out, the family will feel that it was inconsistent